Welcome back. Welcome to our panel. Joining us from the Sky News Centre, Bruce Hawker from Campaigns and Communications, and with me here in Canberra, Graeme Morris from Graeme Morris Consulting. Thanks both for joining us. Let's start on the pokies. Broken deal. Bruce Hawker, this was a devil's choice really for Julia Gillard. Do you think she's made the smart political decision in breaking that deal with Andrew Wilkie but appeasing the clubs?
I think it was always going to be 6 of one, half a dozen of the other, David. I don't think she's going to get too much clear air out of either of those options, never was. Getting it through the Parliament was always going to be a huge problem for the government, but also it was going to be very unpopular with a lot of MPs on the Labor side. So in the end, probably this was the best way to go. Is it going to be a clean break from of the issue for her? I don't really think so. I think it's going to be an ongoing problem of sorts, but it would have been a bigger problem had she not come up with some sort of an answer to Wilkie, which basically said, look, we can't go this far.
But the immediate problem is this is another blow to her credibility.
Yeah, that's the rub in all this, and she's just going to have to push on hard with building up her stocks in the coming weeks and months, trying to get past this issue, because it does play into a lot of the arguments that have been put against her at the moment. Now, part of the problem, of course, was that in the case of Wilkie and the Greens, she was talking about legislative change, whereas in the case of Tony Windsor and Rob Oakeshott, she was really talking about programs that could be put in place much, much harder with a hung parliament not controlling either of the houses to get in place legislative reform, much easier to put in place policies and programs which the independents wanted.
Graeme Morris, do you think this was the smarter political move for Julia Gillard to make?
Look, the idea of delay or doing something, it wasn't a bad idea, but I just have no idea how she's got herself into this pickle. You know, she's almost in no man's land, where Andrew Wilkie has walked away from her. The word trust and the Prime Minister are now strangers, and she's going to cop a huge campaign from the clubs at the next election as they fear what will happen.
Well, this is the point, isn't it? Despite doing what she's done, she's still going to face a campaign at the next election from the coalition, at the very least. Be worried about Labor. They're going to do this eventually.
And yeah, that's right. But she's going to cop it from the clubs themselves, who are going to be, terrified that the Labor government will be re-elected. Incidentally, this talk of 40 million from the clubs is just silly. It's not that high at all.
I think they spent 3 million to date.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, that's closer. But she has ended up in no man's land. But there's a couple of sus things that have happened. The Prime Minister has announced that there's $30,000 in compensation in a sort of a trial that's going to be in the ACT in Canberra. It just so happens that half of the poker machines in Canberra are owned by the Labor Party and the trade unions. Now, if you were feeding them about a trial and somebody was advising her properly, wouldn't you say, look, let's give it to the ACT and our mates can have all that money? But to make the optics look better, let's also include Queanbeyan, Goulburn and Yass. But, of course, they don't give any money to the Labor Party. But they would love to have new foyers at the Queanbeyan League Club.
What do you think now about the precarious nature of the government? It is back to having a one-seat margin. It is, as Tony Abbott's pointed out, relying on Craig Thomson hanging in there in Parliament. Andrew Wilkie's made it clear that he's not guaranteeing support for the government. Bruce Hawker, what are the chances of the government falling over?
I think they're very limited, actually. I don't think Wilkie's going to be in any great hurry to go to an election, because I'm not sure that he would feel very comfortable about the prospects of being re-elected. Ditto for the other independents. And I never thought that the Greens had anywhere to go but to support the government. So I don't think this is going to be a problem in terms of the longevity of the government. I've always believed, and still do, that the government will run its full term. It's more an optics issue for them as they go into 2012. So, no, I don't think it's going to be a big issue for the government, and I don't think Wilkie's going to be in much of a hurry to support the opposition on a confidence motion or in trying to reject supply.
Yeah, he's dealt himself out of the government numbers, Graeme, but he is still an important independent. If he brought down the government, he may not have even any relevance at all should a majority government be elected.
Well, I think Andrew Wilkie can put some credibility and trust back into the word independent now. You know, the Labor Party is running around and saying, look, you know, Andrew Wilkie is like our Labradoodle. You know, we'll let him bark a little bit, but in the end, he'll run around and he'll lick us. You know, they'll give him a pat on the head and he'll always vote for the Labor Party. That's what they think. But this gives him a real chance now to have some real clout and put the word independent up on a pedestal again in the Parliament. But that means that, you know, votes of confidence and those sorts of things that he ought to start seriously thinking about. Just voting against the government on a couple of policy things doesn't count. It's the real ones. And is he an independent, or is he genuine, as the Labor Party thinks, just their little Labradoodle?
Now, I also want your thoughts on asylum seekers. We heard over the weekend Tony Abbott and Scott Morrison reaffirming the plan of the coalitions to turn back boats where it's safe to do so. The reality, Graham, as you know, though, is this only happened in a handful of occasions under the Howard government. Once the message is out that boats are going to be turned back, asylum seekers will start destroying the boats.
But it's all about the optics of it and the messages we are sending. And when you think about, what have we got a Navy for? You know, the Navy is meant to allow trade and good guys to come to this country by sea, but to stop the bad guys and stop the illegals coming in. And you know, otherwise our Navy is just sort of big floating sun decks with people in lovely white uniforms. You know, surely our Navy can deal with some, you know, a few independent, a few fishing ships from Indonesia, say, once a week coming here in these dirty great big boats. After all, their predecessors sailed halfway around the world in tiny little wooden boats. Of course they can do it. And you know, can they turn back all the boats? Well, of course they can't. But they can turn some back, and when it's safe and when it abides by the law of the sea, and that's their job.
Is there a fair point there, Bruce, that at least it sends a powerful message?
Look, if they wanted to send a powerful message, they would support the government on its Malaysia policy, but they won't do that. What they're really saying is that no matter what the government comes up with, we are going to keep this ball in the ruck. We're not going to retreat from making asylum seekers a major issue going into the election whenever it's held. And that's really what Tony Abbott's all about. This has been a charade, in my view, that they've been going through with the government, saying that they're looking at negotiating some sort of an agreement. They've got no intention of reaching bipartisanship. If they wanted to come up with a solution to the problem, they would do what Malcolm Fraser did in the 1970s. They'd work out an agreement involving the countries in the region, the UNHCR, there'd be bipartisanship over it, and those people would be processed in the countries where they arrived. That's not going to happen under Tony Abbott's watch. He's going to keep trying to up the ante at every opportunity to make this an issue that the government's going to be embarrassed over. That's the nature of his politics. It's short-term opportunity for long-term gain as far as he's concerned.
All right, we will have to leave it there. Bruce Hawker, Graeme Morris, good to talk to you both.